Hey, we're back, everybody. Fox 10 Talks. I'm Brian with Trent and Michael Obie back there. We have our attorney extraordinaire, Josh Kolsrud. Thanks, Josh, for coming in. And we have a hot topic today. This is kind of crazy for anyone who partakes in marijuana, which is now legal in Arizona, and owns a firearm. They may not necessarily go together, perhaps. Tell us about this case, what you know about it, Josh.
Yeah, fascinating case. It's fascinating because of who the parties are, what they're arguing, and really the facts of the case. So here you have a dual citizen. His name is Hamani is his last name, and he's a dual citizen of the United States and Pakistan. And he was under FBI investigation for alleged ties to terrorist activities. And the FBI obtained a search warrant to search his home in Texas. And during the search, they discovered trace amounts of cocaine, also a usable amount of marijuana, and a loaded Glock 9mm pistol. But what they didn't find was any indicia that he had any connection to terrorist activities or any other federal crime. Now, here comes the rub. So the FBI didn't just want to let him go. So they had to figure out a way to charge him. And, judges kind of called this situation a gap situation where they kind of fill in the gap, which is they want to charge somebody with a crime. That Khrushchev once said, show me the man and I'll show you the crime. Yeah. Or maybe that was his deputy, but something like that. Yeah. And here there is a little known statute. It's 18 U.S.C. 922 A3. It says this is the same statute that Hunter Biden was convicted under when he took a plea agreement for possessing a firearm while being an addict. He was using crack cocaine. Here, the government's theory is that Khamenei was a habitual user of marijuana and therefore a prohibited possessor because of his class. That is, the class of being a habitual marijuana smoker. And it's a new way, a new theory that the government really hasn't tried prosecuting anybody before. And this case originated out of Texas. And as soon as it was filed, his attorneys, who are very good, filed a motion to dismiss immediately, saying that the statute was unconstitutional, that Mr. Khamenei has a Second Amendment right to possess a firearm. He doesn't have any prior felony convictions, and he was using marijuana in his own home, but he wasn't even high at the time that the feds raided his home. So it'd be one thing if he was driving a car high on cocaine and he had a gun in his pocket, but it's something completely different when he wasn't high on anything, he wasn't drunk. He may have been a habitual marijuana user, but the government's saying that that's enough. But the magistrate judge said, no, I'm going to grant the dismissal. The government then appealed it to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and they also affirmed the dismissal. The government then appealed it to the United States Supreme Court, and they've taken up the issue. Now, here's the interesting part, and that is that it is the Trump's DOJ that is appealing this case to the Supreme Court, meaning that they're supporting the idea that marijuana users, habitual users, should not be able to own and possess firearms, at least while they are habitual users. They do have a caveat saying that if you're no longer a habitual user, then the prohibition no longer applies. Now, the reason why this is interesting, obviously, is that the Trump administration, and I'm just saying this objectively, has been very pro-Second Amendment, opposing any type of law or legislation that would diminish somebody's rights to bear arms. And here, it's not the case. Yeah. It's completely the opposite. And I did some research, and the NRA, the National Rifle Association, which always has an opinion on this stuff, They surprisingly don't.
Gone quiet, huh?
Yeah, they've gone quiet, and they're not going to file what's called an amicus brief, which is a friend of the court. So a lot of interested organizations, they'll file briefs to the Supreme Court telling them what they think should happen. The NRA hasn't indicated that they're going to do that, which is also fishy. So you have to ask yourself, why are they doing this? And I think one of the obvious reasons is that midterms are coming up, and the midterm elections are coming up in 2026. And the overtone of the Republican Party right now is they want to be considered the law and order party. And that if they can get behind at least one lawsuit that they know is probably going to fail in front of the Supreme Court, they can say that they don't support, all the gun rights stuff, the extreme stuff, and they do have limits. So I think that's probably the reason why that they're getting behind a case like this, which is most likely not going to pass. In fact, this might be a rare situation where you have both the liberal and the conservative Supreme Court justices with a 9-0 vote against the government.
Why even take it up then?
Again, I think it's just to show that they're the law and order party, and that they're not in bed with all their crazies.
But the Supreme Court didn't even need to take it. We've had 2 dismissals already. Why would they waste their time?
Very true. It is an issue that does need to be dealt with because the Seventh Circuit has ruled differently than the Fifth Circuit. So there's a difference in appellate courts. Also, there are 32 states that have laws on the books that prohibit people from possessing firearms for status offenses, or like you're a status, like you're a habitual marijuana user, or you're a habitual drunkard, or you have some mental health issues. So if that is your status, and those states have laws that prohibit you from possessing firearms. So the Supreme Court's decision in this case will affect status level offenses and the ability to possess firearms.
Has there been any indication of what the testing method is for a habitual user? Is it someone who I've partaken in it once, maybe, or how do they prove in court that this person is a regular user and therefore needs to have their Second Amendment taken away?
So there's actually case law about this, and in the 18th and 19th centuries, they have a whole slew of case law.
It always goes back to the 18th and 19th century, right?
It really does.
Just a terrible
It's
time.
crazy.
And great for other things.
Yep, dealing with what's called like the drunkard cases, where you had, alcohol was the drug of choice back then, and in those instances, the case law says that habitual is daily use. So if you are a daily user, you would be part of that class.
Josh, can I ask, back to the find the man, I'll find the crime thing. I mean, it sounds such a slippery slope. I guess in some cases you can see a way that it might be necessary. We need to hold on to this guy for some reason. We're pretty darn sure he's a bad guy. But boy, and then we're going back to 1800s for these cases, and how much of that twisting and turning of the law, a round hole in a square peg, does it get us in trouble in the long run?
It does, and it really diminishes the trust that people have in their government, because ultimately citizens are supposed to be able to know what they're doing is wrong to begin with. And I don't think that the average marijuana user, even if they're a habitual user, would think that if I'm sober and doing nothing in my house that I'm now a prohibited possessor. I just don't think that that's reasonable. And for the feds to do that in this case, especially in such a public way, it diminishes their status. And you see that also with some other politically driven prosecutions as of late. And if you're going to challenge something to the Supreme Court, especially if you're the government, you better have some really good arguments coming here, because judges don't like to see these gap statutes coming in to fill in a crime that ordinarily would never be there.
Good point.
Josh, I want to ask you too, on the topic of prosecutions for marijuana, at least federal prosecutions, and you being obviously a ex-federal prosecutor in that, have you noticed a changing of the atmosphere any with how the Justice Department is going after some of those cases, especially compared to 10 years ago, where so many states obviously have laws that are much different than federal law. I know that this case in particular in Texas, a totally different stance in Arizona that we have, but just kind of what the atmosphere of the check is right now and how they're prosecuting these.
Yeah. So, good question. The Attorney General of the United States is the one that's responsible for giving the policy to the individual U.S. attorneys of each state. So in Arizona, we have one U.S. attorney, and the Attorney General has left it up to the individual U.S. attorneys to determine how they are going to enforce the marijuana issues in that particular state. But I'll tell you that the prosecutions for marijuana trafficking have substantially decreased over the last 10 years. And it's not necessarily because of the legalization of marijuana, although that has something to do with it. The reason why is that the Mexican drug cartels have switched from, backpackers bringing over bricks of weed to shipping fentanyl and primarily methamphetamine across the border. So you just don't have the volume that you used to have. And, the drug trafficking statutes usually are used to go after people that are associated with cartels, and, either up the chain or down the chain. But, that is their primary focus for national security reasons.
And I guess someone's done the math. I know you're not a pollster, but you'd think a lot of Republican voters would not be appreciative of this move. They have guns. Maybe they like marijuana. Why are you coming after me?
Well, especially in Arizona, where we certainly have a libertarian streak in our history, where, a basic Arizona feeling that we all have and appreciate is, whatever you do in your own home, as long as it's not really breaking the law, we don't really care.
You can take my gun from a cold dead hand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there's always been that Goldwater kind of feeling, whether you're a liberal or not, or conservative. We've all kind of just respected each other's neighbors and not gotten each other's business too much. Unlike other states, I thought Arizona has done a really good job of staying out of that type of politics, where we still care about our community and our neighborhoods, and I just don't think we want that type of government intrusion into the household, especially when there's no allegation that Mr. Jimeni was actually high during the time of him possessing a firearm.